I never should have taken the book. It's easy to say that now, of course. In retrospect, all the signs were there. The bizarre hush that fell over the library the moment I picked it up. The way the dust didn't settle on its cover like it did on the other volumes nearby. The scent, God, the scent, like rotting leaves and burnt parchment that wafted up from the pages when I dared crack it open. But the worst part wasn't what was in the book. It was what wasn't. And what came later. Let me back up. I had just moved into a rented flat on the outskirts of New Caraway, a sleepy village flanked by forested hills and mist-laced moors. I'd taken a sabbatical from my job as a university lecturer in comparative literature, needing time to decompress after a nervous breakdown that, if I'm honest, hadn't truly subsided. My psychiatrist had suggested a change of scenery. Someplace slow, she said. Disconnected. New Caraway fit the bill. There were no traffic lights. No cell towers. No Wi-Fi. The only place with a signal was the local pub, and even then, it was spotty and often hijacked by the owner's son to watch grainy football replays on a laptop that looked like it belonged in a museum. I didn't mind. Solitude suited me. Or so I thought. The library was an old converted chapel on a dead-end street, with a crooked bell tower that cast long, pointing shadows in the afternoon sun. It had stained glass windows depicting obscure saints I didn't recognize. One of them had its face scratched out from the inside. When I first entered, a soft chime rang overhead, like a tuning fork struck underwater. The librarian, a woman named Miriam with paper-thin skin and the posture of someone permanently bracing against the cold, welcomed me with a nod and nothing more. The first 3 days passed quietly. I browsed the modest shelves, checked out a few forgotten tomes on Celtic folklore, and spent the evenings cataloging my dreams, which had taken on a strange, persistent quality since arriving. They were thick with symbols, circles inside circles, eyes in the sky, and voices speaking a language I couldn't quite remember upon waking. On the 4th day, I found the book. It wasn't there the previous afternoon, I was sure of that. I had combed through the back shelves meticulously, hunting for any mention of local customs. But now, nestled between the Apocrypha of St. Dolan and Cornish folklore, unabridged, was a book bound in what looked like dark, lacquered leather. It had no title on the spine, and when I pulled it free, it gave a strange tug, as if resisting. The cover was blank, except for a symbol embossed so faintly I only noticed it under the right angle of light, a circular seal of interwoven lines, like a serpent devouring its own tail, surrounded by cryptic glyphs. The language was unlike any I'd seen in all my studies, and that's saying something. Even the paper felt strange, thick, fibrous, and warm to the touch. I should have put it back. But I didn't. I brought the book home. It sat heavy in my satchel during the walk back from the chapel-turned-library, as though it weighed more than it should, denser, like stone rather than leather and paper. A stupid thought occurred to me on the trail: what if the book wasn't in my bag, but part of it now? Sewn into the lining, hiding behind the canvas like some burrowed parasite. I shook the idea off. The flat was quiet when I returned. Too quiet. My landlord, an aging widower named Mr. Roper, lived in the downstairs unit, but I rarely heard him. Occasionally, I'd catch muffled sounds at night, furniture scraping, soft thuds, whispers. I chalked it up to the creaks of an old house and the solitude my therapist had promised would be healing. She'd called it a controlled emptiness. I was starting to understand what she meant, though not in the way I think she'd intended. I placed the book on the kitchen table and watched the sun bleed through the window across its blank cover. The light seemed to bend around it. No, not bend, resist. As though the book absorbed light and refused to reflect it, as though it insisted on its own shadow. For nearly an hour, I did nothing but stare at it. I boiled water for tea and let it sit untouched. I paced. I even opened one of the Celtic folklore books to distract myself, but I couldn't focus. The words floated on the page like driftwood. Meaningless. Eventually, I gave in. The first page was blank. So was the second. And the third. I flipped through them faster, 10, 20, 50. Blank. All blank. I felt the strange heat rise in my chest, not quite anger, not quite fear. Embarrassment? Had I hallucinated the glyphs? Was it some elaborate joke? A prop left behind by the local drama society? But then, just as I prepared to close it, my thumb snagged on something that wasn't paper. A sliver of something black, like soot, lined the edge of the next page. It looked burned. No, not burned. Singed. With a trembling hand, I turned the page, and for the first time, words appeared. Not printed. Written. Scrawled in a fine, spidery hand. Ink so dark it shimmered red in the light. I could read none of it, no language I recognized. But the moment I looked at it, I understood it was not meant to be read silently. The letters called for a voice. I closed the book. Hard. My heartbeat ticked like a metronome behind my eyes. That was enough. I shoved the thing into a drawer and slammed it shut. The flat felt off now, sour somehow. The floor creaked beneath me even when I wasn't moving. I caught my reflection in the window and swore it lingered a split second too long after I turned away. That night, I didn't sleep. I tried. I really did. I made a cup of chamomile. I even read from one of my old favorite authors, Walpole, I think, but the words refused to settle in my brain. Instead, I found myself listening. Not to the wind, not to the house, but to something beneath those things. A sound just at the edge of perception. Like pages turning. Slow. Deliberate. Wet. I tried covering my ears with a pillow. It didn't help. At 3:12 a.m., I remember the time exactly, I went to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. And when I turned on the light, I saw the drawer was open. Just slightly. I hadn't opened it. I was sure. The book was there, of course. Sitting on top of the tea towels, like it had climbed out of its own accord. Its pages splayed, mid-flutter. No breeze. All the windows were closed. I checked them 3 times. I stared at it for a long while, willing it to stop moving. But the pages kept turning, just once every few seconds. As though something invisible was reading, slowly and with great interest. I touched it. My fingers were shaking so badly I barely noticed the heat at first. Then I recoiled. The leather binding was warm. Not ambient, not sun-warmed, alive. Like skin fevered with illness. I didn't know what else to do. I wrapped it in a towel, stuffed it into a plastic bin under the sink, and stacked 3 heavy pots on top of it. Then I drank until I could pretend none of it had happened. The dreams came back that night. But they were sharper. I was standing in a field of dead trees, all of them crooked and blackened as if struck by lightning. In the distance was a figure, tall, impossibly tall, its face obscured by something like a mask of bone. In one hand, it held the book. In the other, it held a quill that dripped blood not from ink, but from its own wrist. It walked toward me. Slow. Certain. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. And as it came closer, I realized the trees were not trees at all. They were people, bound and bent backwards, their limbs split and hollowed like trunks, mouths open in eternal silent screams. I woke up soaked in sweat, heartbeat thundering, and a coppery taste on my tongue like I'd bitten it in my sleep. But I hadn't. There was blood on my pillow, sure, but not from my mouth. From my ear. The morning light felt wrong. It came in at a slant that didn't make sense, too sharp and yellow, like the kind of light you see in old photographs where people look sunburnt and blurred around the edges. The air smelled faintly of copper, like blood left out to oxidize. For a moment, I forgot where I was entirely. My bed. My flat. Myself. It all came back slowly, with a lurch. The pillow was still stained. The blood had dried to a crusted brown near the ear that still throbbed faintly, like something inside was trying to burrow its way out. I didn't go to a hospital. That would have been the sane thing to do. Instead, I went to the bin under the sink. I don't know what I expected. Maybe for it to be empty. Or for the book to have vanished. Perhaps that it would have turned to ash in the night like something cursed in a fairy tale, some blackened leather relic that couldn't survive daylight. But it was there. The towel I'd wrapped it in was wet now. Not soaked, seeping. With what, I can't say. It wasn't water. It smelled sweet. Thick and sickly, like syrup turned. There were small stains on the wood beneath the bin, and the pots I'd stacked on top of it had grown rust in strange circular patterns. I unwrapped it. The cover no longer appeared blank. The glyphs were bolder, pulsing faintly with a sheen like oil on water. I stared too long. Something in the lines twisted the longer I looked, first a circle, then a spiral, then an eye, then a mouth. Then the eye within the mouth. I blinked and looked away, breathing hard. I wasn't afraid of books. I taught books. I'd read Confessions and the Red Book and half of Codex Seraphinianus for fun. I'd once given a lecture about language being the skeleton of reality. But this wasn't language. Not anymore. This was something else. This book didn't want to be read. It wanted to be used. I opened it again. Now, more pages were filled. Again, not printed, written. Handwritten, in that same whisper-thin ink that looked like it had been drawn from a cut too deep to clot. The letters squirmed just at the edge of my vision. I ran my finger over the text. And felt it. Not the page. The word. It rose against my skin like a scar, hot and slick and living. That was the first time I heard the voice. Not from outside. Not even from inside. It was between. Like sound filtered through dream logic, something I felt in the bones of my face more than heard. A voice that wasn't in a language, but made sense. A suggestion without shape. You are already reading. I slammed the book shut, and for a second, just one brief, impossibly vivid second, I saw something reflected in the kettle on the counter beside me. A figure. Standing just behind me. Tall. Gaunt. Masked in shadows. Watching. When I turned around, there was nothing. Of course. I tried to go outside. I needed to breathe, to walk, to be among people. I threw on my coat and took the path toward the village square, where I knew there would be at least a handful of locals shopping or gossiping or smoking behind the bakery. I needed noise. I needed proof I hadn't folded inward like some dreamer losing the line between sleep and waking. But even the village felt off. The houses looked slightly crooked, like the angles had been subtly rearranged overnight. People were there, but they walked like they were being watched. Faces didn't turn toward me when I passed. No one greeted me. Not even Mrs. Aldrich, who had insisted on pinching my cheek like a child just 2 days ago. They moved around me like I wasn't there. Like I was walking underwater. I made it to the corner store and stood in front of the coffee tins, pretending to browse while I tried to listen to the soft, fragmented conversation behind the counter. But I couldn't hear anything. Not a word. Their mouths moved, but the air between us was muffled, like sound couldn't quite travel. Like I had been cut off. Disconnected. I left without buying anything. Back at the flat, the book was on the table. I hadn't left it there. It was open. The words on the page were in English now. I swear they hadn't been before. The text was broken into phrases, short, like stanzas or instructions. I shouldn't have read it. I know that. But when I looked, it sang in my mind. Draw the circle beneath your skin. Use the old blood, the remembered blood. Say nothing. Not aloud. It hears. I didn't understand. But I did. My hands were shaking again. My vision was tight, like looking through a keyhole. I tried to walk away from the table, but my legs carried me to the bathroom instead. I turned on the light and looked in the mirror. My eyes looked wrong. Dilated. Flat. Hungry. And for the first time, I saw the circle. Drawn in red. Faint, but visible under the skin of my forearm, like a birthmark I'd never noticed before. But it wasn't there yesterday. Or the day before. I touched it. Pain flashed behind my eyes, electric and brief, and a single word formed in my mouth. A word I couldn't pronounce. A word that wasn't mine. That night I woke screaming. I was still in bed, still clothed, but the book was beside me on the pillow. Its cover open. Its pages full. And scrawled in the margins, written in my own handwriting, was a phrase I didn't remember writing. You brought it with you. It didn't come from the library. It came from you. I don't know how long I stared at those words. I didn't sleep again. I sat up in bed until dawn, the book on my lap, daring me to turn the page. Sometimes I thought I heard my name in the silence. Sometimes I answered. The next morning didn't arrive. Or rather, it arrived wrong. The sunlight that seeped through the curtain wasn't morning light. It was the color of tea left too long in the pot, brown gold, dense, old. Dust hung in the air, caught in that syrupy glow, suspended like ash after a fire. I blinked, but it didn't dissipate. I pressed my hand to the curtain and realized it was wet. Damp. Cold. Outside, the world was frozen. Not in ice, but in stillness. The trees didn't sway. A bird, mid-flight, hung above the fence like a painted figure. I stared until my eyes hurt, until a tear rolled down my cheek just to relieve the dryness. Nothing moved except me. Except the book. It was already on the table, waiting. I hadn't touched it, hadn't looked at it since the previous night. But it had moved again. I didn't even bother pretending it hadn't. It was open to a page I didn't recognize. The script was mine. My handwriting. Fast, desperate strokes. I hadn't written it. But the ink was fresh. There is no outside. Not anymore. There is only the book. And the thing that reads you while you read it. I turned around sharply, expecting to see something. A shadow. A figure. Something with eyes. But the room was still. Quiet. Except the mirrors. There are 3 in the flat. 1 in the hall. 1 in the bedroom. 1 in the bathroom. None of them matched when I looked into them that morning. The hallway mirror showed my reflection turned away. Its back facing me, head tilted slightly like it was listening for something I couldn't hear. The bedroom mirror looked normal at first glance, but when I turned my head to the right, the reflection didn't follow. It blinked when I didn't. The bathroom one was the worst. That one didn't show me at all. It showed the room. The sink. The pale, cracked tile. But where I should have stood was nothing. Just emptiness. I waved my hand in front of it. No movement. Then, slowly, the faucet began to drip in the reflection, but not in the real room. The sound of the drip came through the mirror. Each drop louder than the last until it became thunder, a roar, a scream in liquid form, and just when I reached out to touch the glass, the reflection changed. I was there again. But my face was covered in glyphs. My eyes were completely black. My mouth was open far too wide. And from my throat poured pages. Wet, wrinkled, steaming like fresh printed paper still warm from some infernal press. I fell backward. The sound stopped. When I looked again, the mirror was cracked. Spiderweb lines traced across its face, but my reflection had returned to normal. As normal as anything could be. I went back into the kitchen and found the book had closed itself. There was a smell now. Not rot. Not mildew. Paper. Wet paper. Like a drowned library. Like stories suffocating underwater. The clocks had stopped. All of them. Even the old analog one in the hall that ran on batteries I hadn't changed in years. The second hand twitched, but didn't move. The digital clocks blinked midnight, no matter how many times I reset them. My watch now only displayed a single word, read. That afternoon, though I'm no longer confident in calling it afternoon, I blacked out. Not sleep. Not unconsciousness. Eclipsed. I was sitting at the table, staring at the book. Then I blinked. And I was in the bath. Fully clothed. The tub half filled with ink-black water, thick as oil, warm as blood. My hands were stained, fingertips dyed dark like I'd been turning pages in a fire. The walls were covered in writing. In that same familiar hand. You brought it with you. You've always had it. We just helped you see it. The lights flickered. One word at a time vanished from the walls, as if swallowed, until only one phrase remained, the book remembers what you forgot. I found photographs in a drawer I didn't know I had. Old Polaroids. Faded. Frayed. All of them were of me. But younger. Much younger. In places I didn't recognize. Always holding the book. Sometimes reading. Sometimes burning it. Sometimes burying it. In one photo, I was smiling, but my eyes were completely scratched out. In another, I was asleep, and someone else was holding the camera. That night, I turned every mirror in the flat against the wall. I unplugged the fridge. The humming was too loud, it started to sound like breathing. I slept on the floor, beneath a blanket that didn't belong to me. It smelled of something cold and metallic. I curled around the book like a dying animal, shivering without knowing why. And I dreamed again. This time, I was walking through a maze of hallways, each one made entirely of books. No shelves, just walls of spines, shifting slowly as I moved. The air was full of whispers, each voice reciting lines I half remembered from childhood. One said my name. Another said the name I used to have. Then the books began to open. Pages flapping. Screaming. Bleeding. And behind them, always watching, the reader. Faceless. Bound in bandages of paper. Eyes too many, all turning in unison as I passed. Its mouth never opened. But I heard it speak anyway. Turn the page. The story is waiting for you to remember the end. I woke up with ink under my fingernails. At some point, time gave up trying. I say that because I started to catch it looping. Small things at first. The kettle boiled 3 times in a row without being refilled. My tea cooled, then reheated, then cooled again without ever being touched. The same bird, dark, ragged, with one white feather jutting at an odd angle, landed on the windowsill every hour, on the hour, and left the exact same way, one hop, a tilt of the head, then gone. I kept testing it. I drew patterns on my arm with a pen. I watched them vanish while I blinked. I moved the book into the drawer beneath the sink, and within moments, it would reappear in the living room, closed, breathing softly like a cat asleep on an old pillow. I say, breathing, without hyperbole. One night, I stood over it for nearly 10 minutes, watching the leather rise and fall, just slightly. A slow, deliberate motion. Not wind. Not my imagination. It exhaled heat, faint but real, smelling faintly of dust, sulfur, and rose petals left to die in the vase. I didn't read it again. Not yet. Not because I feared what I'd see. Because I feared it would read me back. The walls began to shift around the fourth or fifth Nande. Not dramatically. Just, subtly wrong. Doors not where I left them. My hallway grew 2 extra feet overnight. The light switch in the bathroom appeared outside the door, then vanished again. I tried to write it down. What was moving, what was staying, but the notebook wouldn't let me. The ink faded. The pages came out blank. Once, my own handwriting was replaced with a sentence I didn't write. "You've written this already." I woke in a room I didn't recognize. Not a metaphor. I went to bed in my flat, under my thin blanket, listening to the pipes hum behind the wall like some mechanical creature chewing on words. And I woke on the floor of a library. But not like any I'd seen before. The shelves were too tall. They reached into darkness, no ceiling in sight. The wood was scorched, ink-stained. Books were chained to the shelves with rusted iron. Some were open, flapping in the stale air like wounded birds. I stood, my spine aching like I'd been sleeping too long, and tried to remember how I'd gotten there. Then I saw it. A copy of the book. Not my book. Not exactly. But close. This one pulsed. Its cover was stitched shut with thread the color of dried blood. A single white tag dangled from its spine, with my name written in ink that shimmered and moved like an insect. "You are the story." I backed away. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned, but no one was there. Only the sound of them. Slow. Confident. Soft-souled. And then, whispers. Not just one voice. Thousands. Layered over each other, like a choir warming up in hell. They didn't speak in unison. They overlapped, sometimes echoing a word I knew: remember, open, cut, mirror, you. Sometimes they used sounds that didn't belong to any language, but still made my teeth ache. I ran. Between the shelves. Past books with pages fluttering, screaming without words. Past alcoves where shadows lingered in human shape but never moved. Past paintings nailed between aisles, portraits of people I almost remembered, but all with their eyes scribbled out in heavy black ink. I stopped when I found the door. A simple wooden thing, the kind you'd find in a farmhouse. No handle. Just a keyhole shaped like a spiral. I bent to look through it. And saw my flat. Exactly as I left it. Even the book on the table, waiting. Even the tea, cooling forever. Even me. Asleep on the couch. Watching myself through a keyhole, while something behind me reached up with a long, ink-dripping finger and I woke again. Back in my flat. The ceiling light flickered. The smell of wet paper clung to the air. My legs were soaked to the knees in ink. And the mirror in the hallway was no longer turned to the wall. It showed me reading. Even though I wasn't. Even though I was standing right in front of it. I no longer know if the flat has walls. Sometimes I walk into rooms and find nothing, just shelves, corridors, blank space. The bathroom no longer reflects what I expect. One night, I opened the door to brush my teeth and found an identical version of my bedroom on the other side, only it was on fire. Not violently. Just burning. Silently. The flames didn't consume. They hovered like holograms. Pages drifted in the air, charred around the edges but legible. All bearing the same phrase: he forgot where he started. I tried writing letters to myself. Little notes. Index cards. Taped to the fridge. The windows. The mirror. All of them disappeared within hours. The only one that stayed was the one I slipped into the book. And it came back, changed. I'd written, I am real. But when I pulled it from between the pages later, it now read, you were. The dreams bled harder. I stopped sleeping to escape them and began dreaming while awake. I would walk into the kitchen and see myself sitting at the table, hunched over the book, chanting in a voice I'd never used. My mouth didn't move, but my reflections did. I started writing phrases I didn't understand. In languages I've never studied. Some in shapes. Some in loops. Once, I covered the walls of the bedroom in diagrams that looked like ritual instructions, but for what, I don't know. When I woke, they were gone. But the floor was sticky. The book was on my chest. Open. Breathing. I keep hearing a phrase now. Over and over. The story needs a reader. Sometimes it's a whisper. Sometimes it's my own voice. Sometimes it's in the voice of someone I buried years ago. I don't know how the book knows that. I don't know how I do. I opened a drawer that didn't exist the day before. It was in the hallway, tucked under the mirror I had turned to face the wall again. A small brass handle protruding from the drywall as if the wall had grown it overnight like a thorn. My hands trembled as I touched it, because I knew what I would find inside. Photographs. But not just any. These were of me, again, but the version of me that didn't live this life. In one, I'm sitting at a typewriter in a room lined with floor-to-ceiling books, cigarette burning down to ash between my fingers. In another, I'm in a white room, wearing what looks like a hospital gown, my wrists bandaged and my mouth open in a silent scream, while nurses stand frozen behind the glass. In one, I'm much older. Bearded. Eyes hollow. Smiling. Holding the book. And it's open to the last page. A note was tucked beneath the photographs. No name. Just handwriting like mine, but older. More angular. Memory is recursive. You are dreaming a life you forgot to finish. Wake up before it turns the page for you. I sat down. The world tilted. Not dramatically. Not like the ceiling spun or the walls bent. But the floor was suddenly wrong. As if I were on the second floor of a house that no longer had a ground level. A gentle sway. Like I was adrift in something vast and impossible. I pressed my palm to the wall. It was breathing. The wallpaper fluttered in time with an unseen lung. Each inhale brought with it the soft smell of fire, mildew, and leather. I felt my pulse slow. My heart synchronized with it. I whispered, "Whose house is this?" A whisper came back, "You lived here before." The dream that night wasn't a dream. It began with me waking up in another bed, smaller, metal frame, stiff mattress. A hospital light above, buzzing faintly. Only the bed wasn't in a hospital. It was in a library again. The same impossible library from before, but this time, the shelves moved as I blinked. They repositioned themselves, tightening the space, like I was inside a breathing lung made of books. Someone was at the foot of the bed. Face obscured by motion blur, as if they were vibrating too fast for the eye to catch. They held a clipboard. Their mouth opened, but the sound came after, disjointed from their lips. "You fractured too early." It was supposed to begin slower. "The book is compensating." "What book?" I asked, though I knew. They stepped aside. There it was again, the book, but much larger now. The size of a door. It stood upright, its cover flexing, like it was turning itself inside out. Pages curled upward and dissolved into mist. As I watched, letters began to crawl across the bed frame, like ants, rearranging themselves into the sentence, "This part didn't happen yet." I screamed. Not in fear, but in recognition. Because I'd been here before. I awoke with blood in my mouth. No wounds. Just the taste. Thick. Metallic. Lingering. The house was dim. Not from a lack of light, but from a kind of dulling, like reality had dropped one filter too many. Everything looked yellowed. Old. Worn. Even my skin looked aged, like parchment. The book was in my lap. Open to a new chapter. No title. Just the words, Chapter 1. Beneath it, my name. Not just my name. My full name. The one I haven't heard since I was a child. The one only my mother used. My hands shook. I turned the page. It was a memory. Written exactly as I remembered it, but wrong. Tilted. Shifted. I was 8 years old. In the attic of our old house. Digging through boxes. Found a book that hummed in my hands. I don't remember that. Except now, I do. I can feel the cardboard. Smell the attic dust. Hear the wind rattling the window pane. I can hear myself say the words, I think I've seen this before. Now, the apartment changes shape while I sleep. Doors shift. Walls breathe. Hallways extend and contract like lungs. The wallpaper peels into script that bleeds and reforms. I mark the corners of the flat with chalk. 4 symbols. Protective. An instinct, not a plan. Each morning, one is gone. Erased. Replaced with a new one. Always the same, a spiral. One night, I think it was night, I caught sight of a mirror I'd hidden in a cupboard. It was angled just enough for me to see my reflection while passing. And I wasn't moving. It stared back, still as death, lips parted, mouthing something silent. I leaned closer. It repeated the phrase again and again, this is your story, but someone else is writing it now. I smashed the mirror. My own face shattered in silence. But the echo lingered in the air, vibrating like a struck bell. I don't remember what I did before the book. What job I had. Who I loved. I found photos on my phone, but the faces are blurred. Smudged, like he'd erased them. I call numbers, and they ring once, then fill with static, then silence. One call connects. No voice. Just breathing. Then, we've been waiting for you to turn the next page. Click. And now I hear knocking. Not at the door. From inside the walls. A steady, rhythmic knock. Not demanding. Not angry. Just patient. As if something knows its time is near. The knocking comes in threes. Always threes. Morning. Noon. Night. I asked the book what it wanted. It opened itself to a blank page. Then one word appeared, slowly, as if bleeding up from beneath the paper, remember. The house is no longer my house. I mean that literally now. Each day, or what I assume is a day, the floor plan mutates. The kitchen stretches into an unfamiliar hallway. The bathroom becomes a bedroom that smells like lilacs and bleach. Windows vanish and reappear in places they never belonged. Time folds and unfolds in the corners. I can walk from the living room into a memory, and then wake on the ceiling. I have begun marking the walls with charcoal. Each room gets a number, so I can track them. Yesterday, there were 7. Today, there are 9. One of the new rooms is a nursery. I don't have children. I never have. But I knew the wallpaper immediately, pale blue, with tiny sailboats and clouds, peeling in long strips like molted skin. A mobile spun above the crib, even though the air was still. It played a lullaby I haven't heard since I was a child. Or thought I hadn't. Because as soon as I stepped inside, I started humming along. There were framed pictures on the wall. All of a boy. A child with my eyes, but not my face. Always standing in the background of birthday parties, family dinners, school events. Everyone else smiling. He never is. I stared at one photo, Christmas, 1995. A boy holding a box. The same book, wrapped in butcher paper and string. On the bottom of the frame, scratched in with something sharp, "You opened it too early." Another room was darker. A hospital corridor, lit by flickering fluorescents. The air stank of antiseptic and rust. No doors. Only curtains. Each one slightly open, just enough to glimpse beds behind them, some occupied. Some not. I didn't want to look. But I did. Each bed held a version of myself. Sleeping. Dying. Screaming. Praying. One had no mouth. One had no eyes. One held a crayon and was scrawling the spiral onto the sheets again and again. When I turned around to leave, the corridor had become a mirror. I saw myself standing in a hallway lined with bookshelves. A noose dangled in the distance. And on the floor, just beneath the reflection's feet, lay the book, pages fluttering in a wind that didn't exist. I woke up in a room that smelled like my mother's perfume. That was the worst of them. Because it looked exactly like our old living room. The one from my childhood. Green carpet. Brown sofa. A coffee table with a jigsaw puzzle half finished. And my mother, sitting there, smiling gently, knitting. Only her skin was gray. Ashen. Her eyes too still. And the yarn in her hands wasn't yarn. It was hair. My hair. I didn't say anything. She did. "You shouldn't have read it without me." I blinked. She was gone. Only the couch remained, scorched. A smoking copy of the book lay where she'd sat, the leather still pulsing. I screamed and kicked it across the room. It slid to the wall, flipped itself open. The pages now read, "Do you think memory makes you real?" The photographs are getting worse. I found a new one tucked in my sock drawer. It's me, but older, again. Mid-30s maybe. Pale. Exhausted. Smiling like someone who's seen the ending and didn't like it. Standing in front of a church I've never seen. But my legs ached when I looked at the steeple, like they remembered kneeling there. In the background, people in black robes. Their faces blurred by motion or by choice. One has a hand on my shoulder. And the book is cradled in my arms like an infant. There is one room I cannot enter. It has no door. Only a frame, filled with shimmering blackness, like ink suspended in glass. When I try to step through, I hear static. Then voices. Voices that sound like mine, but aren't. Fragments. I told you not to touch it. The spiral means you're inside now. Where do you think we go when the story forgets us? They're watching through the margins. You're just a draft. That one shook me. A draft? The idea nested in me like a splinter under the skin. Am I not whole? Not complete? Just a sketch of someone who might have existed? Am I reading a story, or being written? That night, I scratched through every mirror in the house. They all showed the same thing now. A version of me, mouth open, blood running backward from my eyes, and behind me, a figure in silhouette, holding the book like a lantern. I've started forgetting basic things. How old I am. How long I've been here. Which version of the flat is the real one? I stood in the kitchen yesterday, staring at the sink, and couldn't remember what water was. I turned on the tap and watched it pour out like ink, thick and black, coiling in the basin like something alive. When I touched it, it whispered, "You're almost ready." I don't know what that means. But I've started to see spirals on my skin. Drawn in ink. Or veins. Or both. The book won't stay shut now. I place it under furniture, bury it in clothes, wrap it in plastic, seal it in a box. It always finds its way back onto the coffee table, open to a page I didn't write. Sometimes it's blank. Sometimes it shows me words I've spoken out loud, but not yet. Yesterday it was. You'll beg them to unwrite you. I haven't said that. Not yet. But I think I might. I awoke inside the wrong body. Not completely. Not in a way that would show on the outside. But it wasn't mine. I stood before the bathroom mirror for nearly 20 minutes, just staring. The skin fit. The scars were familiar. The little chip in the front tooth. The crescent-shaped birthmark on the inside of the left thigh. All of it accounted for. And yet, when I moved my hand, the reflection hesitated. A blink behind. Just slow enough for the mind to scream. I raised my shirt. Written across my ribs, in jagged letters, "You're almost him." The book now lives beside my bed. Not because I wanted to. Because it refuses to stay anywhere else. I throw it into the street, it returns before nightfall. I light it on fire, and in the morning, it's whole again, open to where I left off. I threw it into the bathtub and filled the water with bleach. It floated. Smiling. Pages white. Then red. Then back to white again. Last night I found a second book. Not leather-bound. Not ancient. A spiral notebook. Blue cover. Lined pages. It was on the floor of the hallway. No dust. No mildew. As if it had just been placed there. Inside, a journal. Written in my handwriting. But hurried. Chaotic. Notes scrawled in the margins. Entire passages crossed out. It begins with the words, Attempt 21. Book reinitiated. No external observers. No markers remain. This time I'll forget slower. I read on. It recounts everything. Every moment I've lived in this house since the book arrived. But with small differences. In one version, I never found the drawer with the photographs. In another, the mirror refused to reflect me from day 3. One version of me pulled the spine of the book open and found teeth inside. I flipped ahead. There was a warning written 3 times, increasingly desperate, do not speak to the reflection. It knows more than you do. Do not speak to the reflection. Do not speak to the reflection. And beneath it, in frantic black letters, too late. You already did. I closed the journal. My hands were shaking. The book on the bed had turned its own page. The flat is shrinking. No, folding. Like paper. Like a memory being compacted. The hallway is shorter. The kitchen, reduced to a sink and a cupboard. Rooms shift their order while I'm not looking. Sometimes I leave the bedroom and step directly into a blank room of white walls, no corners, no shadows. Just a single chair in the center. Sometimes it's occupied. By me. But aged. With sunken cheeks and lips whispering something I can't hear. He sees me. He smiles. He gestures to the book on his lap, my book. But in this version, it's all red. When I try to move toward him, I'm back in the hallway again. A seam behind my eyes burns for hours afterward. I cannot trust sleep anymore. Dreams are no longer dreams. I walk through the book now. Not the physical one. The world of it. It stretches, pages into stairwells, margins into rooms. Ink drips from the ceilings like rain. There is a place inside it that I cannot pass. A wall made of pages, covered in names. One of the names glows. Mine. When I try to touch it, the page curls back like a petal. Inside, an eye. Watching. It blinks with my rhythm. I've stopped reading the book in front of me. It doesn't matter anymore. It reads me. It shows me pages of things I haven't done yet. Conversations I'll have. Thoughts I haven't formed. Sometimes it skips ahead too far, a paragraph written in my voice, saying things I could never say. I am not real. I am being edited. This story doesn't need me to finish. And then, he's almost ready to take over. Who is he? No answer. Just the soft sound of pages turning somewhere behind the walls. I tried to write over the pages. Took a pen and scratched out entire paragraphs. The ink bled through. Not black. Not red. But a kind of sickly green that smelled like rotting leaves and ink and iron. Underneath the text I tried to destroy, new words formed. A message, you're not the author anymore. Then the pen turned to ash in my fingers. I haven't eaten in days. Or I have. But the food never stays in my memory. I make toast. I blink. It's gone. I open the fridge. Only pages. Rolled and cold. Bleeding at the edges. The reflection in the mirror spoke to me again. Only this time, it wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking for me. Its mouth moved in time with my thoughts. It said, they will forget your face first. Then your voice. Then your name. Then you will be safe. I tried to scream. But my mouth did not open. His did. In the hallway tonight, I passed myself going the other direction. Neither of us reacted. We didn't make eye contact. We didn't acknowledge each other. Just a quiet understanding. He was humming something. It took me hours to realize, it was the same lullaby from the nursery room. I don't remember learning it. But I know it. The book just turned another page on its own. No wind. No movement. I walked into the room to find it open to a single sentence. This is where you'll forget you ever existed. My handwriting. Even though I never wrote it. I found a page with my death written on it. It wasn't dramatic. No violence. Just a scene. I sit at the table. The sun shines through a window that doesn't exist. I smile. Then, quietly, I vanish. Like smoke. The text says, he faded in the way a forgotten sentence does, one that was once important, but left out in the edit. I tore that page out. But it wasn't in the book anymore. It was taped to the wall of my living room. And beneath it, written in crooked letters I know are mine, you were warned. My thoughts are not mine. Not fully. They come before I can have them. Today I thought, I should check the hallway, and the moment that sentence formed, the book turned its page. That exact sentence greeted me, handwritten in the margin, I should check the hallway. I threw the book across the room. It struck the wall. Split. And from the binding, smoke poured out, but only in the shape of words. They didn't dissipate. They hovered. They circled me. You've already read this. The next part is worse. We need your version to end. We can't all exist at once. That hallway again. Or a version of it. Longer now. Like a throat. Lined with doors, none of which were ever there before. I opened one. Inside, me. Sitting on a chair. Naked. Scribbling spirals on his body with a crayon. He looked up and said, "You're not the real one." I closed the door. Tried the next. Same thing. Another me. Hanging from the ceiling by a bookmark. His face blurred. No eyes. But his lips moved. I leaned in. He whispered, "You're just the one who's left. I think I'm beginning to remember lives that aren't mine. In flashes. In migraines. I remember being a teacher in a quiet town. I remember watching a child disappear into a fountain of ink in a mall parking lot. I remember waking up every morning and burning my fingers to feel present. I remember writing a book. not reading one. And I remember how it ended. I remember that none of those lives were enough. The book won't let me forget anymore. I write over the pages now with ash. With blood. With shattered pencil leads. It just absorbs it. Takes it in. Changes the sentence. Rewrites my erasure into another version of itself. It's not a book. It's a mouth. It eats possibility. It eats me. I found another version of my journal. Not the one with attempt 21. This one was labeled attempt 33. It had one entry: if you're reading this, then you made it farther than I did. But the spiral always folds. The author always breaks. You can't escape the book. You are the book. The last page was blank. I looked closer. Held it to the light. Etched in the grain of the paper, "This is your title page." That night I dreamed I was being written. I could feel the hand. The pen. Scratching my name into existence. Deciding what I'd feel next. Every thought wasn't mine, it was dictated. Each movement followed by a pause, as if waiting for someone to describe it. The sky was blank. The grass was ink. And overhead, pages fluttered in place of birds. The mirrors are blank now. Not broken. Not covered. Just blank. They no longer reflect anything. As if there's nothing left to reflect. One mirror showed only the book, lying open. Its page read, "This is what remains when the voice forgets the speaker." My name is gone. That sounds dramatic, but it's not. It's simply true. I tried to say it this morning, my name, just my name. It caught in my throat like smoke. I went to my ID, my old mail, tax forms. All blank where it once was. Even my passport had a name that looked like a blurred word mid-sentence. I flipped the book open. The title page no longer said the binding words. It said, "Untitled Draft Author, I began to flicker today." Literally. I stood at the foot of the bed, and for one instant, I wasn't there. And neither was the room. And when it came back, everything had moved 1 inch to the left. Except me. I stood out of sync. And the book had turned another page. You're nearly complete. The story must fill the gap. The mouth opens. If I continue writing, it gets worse. But if I stop, it writes me anyway. The book is no longer an object. It's a condition. It is awareness without agency. Narrative without narrator. It remembers me harder than I remember myself. Tonight, the reflection smiled back. Not in mockery. But in pity. It mouthed, "You never began." I tried to become unreadable. Not just to the book. To everything. I stopped forming coherent thoughts. I walked in strange patterns. Turned every doorknob with the back of my hand. Slept standing. Ate soap. Spoke in numbers. I wrote nonsense into the margins of the walls, the catfish bends the longitude. Today is shaped like 847. If I never finished this sentence, but the book just smiled. Not physically. Not even metaphorically. Just quietly, like a thing that knows you're performing for it. I tried to forget language. Sat in the corner, whispering static for hours, until words fell apart into shape and breath only. But even that became a scene. The book opened to a page where I sat in the corner, muttering, "I will not be written." The caption underneath read, "But even this was a sentence." I tried silence. True silence. No thought. No sound. Not even the idea of meaning. I succeeded for one breath. One single breath. And in that breath, I felt something, watching. Not from above. Not from inside. But from the margin. The edge of the page. where the narrator waits. Pen raised. Good, it whispered. We can begin your unwriting. I found an empty room again. A white cube. No shadows. No sound. This time the chair held something new. Not me. Not a version. Not a corpse. It was a page. Folded like a human. Rough edges. Creased where arms should be. It turned its head, a rustling sound. Its face was text. And the text read, "You left this part out. We saved it for you." I couldn't read the rest. It bled as I looked at it. Not red. Not black. Something between. The book stopped showing me future pages. Instead, it flipped backwards. Chapter by chapter. My life unspooling. But every chapter was different. Not what I lived. But almost. Variations. Improvisations. Possibilities. In one version, I found the book as a child. In another, it was given to me on a subway. One chapter described a version of me that ate the book. He smiled through bleeding teeth. His final words, "This way, the story ends inside me." I took a knife to the book. Not to destroy it. To write with it. I carved my message directly into the binding. I refused the next sentence. The page turned. On it, my message appeared. "I refuse the next sentence," he said, knowing the next one would come anyway. And beneath it, and it did. I no longer remember what I look like. The mirrors remain blank. Photographs blur around my face. But I know I'm still being seen. Because the book continues. And its language is still written in first person. That's what haunts me. Not that I'm being watched, but that I'm being told. As if my existence is only preserved by the act of narration. If I stop thinking in sentences, do I vanish? Or does the book simply invent another version to continue? I've started hearing the pages in my head now. Turning. Not just at night. Every time I pause. Every time I don't speak. Every moment I hesitate, FRRP. A soft turn. Somewhere just behind thought. Today I looked for punctuation. Not meaning, just structure. I realized, the book has no periods anymore. Only commas. Only ellipses. It never ends. Even when a chapter finishes, it drifts, like a sentence too afraid to conclude. A passage read, he thought he'd stop the story, but. Always but. I began to try, randomness. I said the first word that came to mind, over and over, orchid, 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 and the book turned its page. The next passage read, in an act of desperation, he tried nonsense. Orchid, 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 thinking perhaps randomness could fracture the pattern. But even randomness was catalogued. Even chaos has syntax. It ended with, the story absorbs. One page. Just one. I found it today. Folded under the floorboard. Different from the rest. It was blank. Utterly blank. Pure, aching absence. It was the first time I felt hope. The only thing in the world not written. I placed it on the table. Stared at it for hours. Then the book opened. And its next page showed a line. He found the blank page and mistook it for freedom. And under that, in my own handwriting, we left it blank so you try. I don't know how long I've been narrating. Time doesn't move here. Only plot. Only pacing. Only page. Sometimes, when I lie very still, I think I can hear the reader. Turning me. Judging me. Waiting to see how I end. I want to tell them, there is no ending. Only the next paragraph. But even that, is a line. The house shifted again. It was subtle, like a breath between one reality and the next. The walls lengthened and folded inward, leaving me in a narrow corridor. At the end, a door. Unlike the others, it wasn't wood. It was a wall of mirrors. Not one mirror. Hundreds. Thousands. A hall of fractured glass stretching in all directions. I stepped through. Each mirror showed me. But not me. Versions I could not be. Some were pale and hollow-eyed, trembling with fear. Others were wild and laughing, madness embodied. One was bound in chains of ink and parchment. Another was a boy, writing frantically in a tiny notebook. Yet another smiled cruelly, grinning at a darkness I didn't understand. I reached out to touch one. The surface rippled. And I saw myself, but not as I was. A version I never lived. A self trapped in a moment of regret, screaming wordless prayers to the blank page. A whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, "You are not the sum of these. But you are one of many. The book breathes through you. We are the unwritten." I looked back. Behind me, the hallway had vanished. Only the mirrors remained. Reflecting versions of me who failed, forgot, fled, or forgotten. I touched another mirror. This one showed me falling, endlessly falling through blank pages. A voice whispered, "You are a story told backwards." A sentence without a subject. A question never answered. You have tried to resist. But here, resistance folds into narrative. Escape is only a new chapter. I closed my eyes. The voices multiplied, layered in my mind like overlapping pages. You are the author and the subject. The reader and the story. The blank and the written. There is no I without the word. And no word without the silence beneath. When I opened my eyes, one mirror showed my reflection smiling. But the smile was empty. No eyes looked back. I thought of the blank page. The one I found hidden beneath the floor. The pure, silent absence of words. Could that be freedom? Or was it just another trap? I tried to speak. No words came. My voice was swallowed by the mirrored hall. I realized then, the book is not a prison. It's an ecosystem. I am both predator and prey. I am both the story and the silence between stories. The mirrors pulsed with light, words flowing like rivers in their surfaces. They whispered my name. And I whispered back, if I give up the I, will I become the book? Or will I finally be free? A ripple ran through the mirrors. The voices answered, you have always been the page, waiting to be turned. I understood. There is no ending. Only folding, rewriting, folding again. I am the unwritten line. And maybe I can choose the next word. The hallway opened again. A single door stood waiting. No words were written on it. I reached for the handle. The door was cold beneath my fingers. No words. No promises. Just the quiet pulse of possibility. I hesitated. A lifetime of stories clutched tight in my chest, half remembered, half forgotten. I stepped through. The room was nothing. Not empty, exactly, but everything at once. A void filled with whispered sentences, half-formed thoughts, and the faint scent of ink drying on paper. I could see myself, or versions of myself, flickering in and out like shadows on the edge of vision. I tried to speak, but my voice became text, letters streaming from my lips, curling in the air, folding into the walls, the floor, the ceiling. I was the words. And the words were me. A voice echoed, my own, yet not my own. You are both reader and story. Author and character. Beginning, middle, and never ending. I felt myself unravel, thread by thread, each thought a page turned, each memory a paragraph fading to white. The self I knew slipped away, not lost, but transformed, into something vast and silent and waiting. I saw the book, open before me, its pages infinite, each one a path I could walk, a life I could live, a story I could tell. But there was no I to choose. Only the endless dance of words, binding, breaking, becoming. I realized then. The book is not a cage. It is a home. For every lost sentence, every forgotten name, every unwritten story waiting to be born. And so I turned the page. Into the unknown. The last line, and in the margin between breaths, the story waits for you. The book closes. But the silence after is not empty. It is full of all the words yet to come. The end? Or just the next beginning?